Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Lindsay Green.
And I'm your host, Noel John Toohey.
And we are a pair of rankers. Let's get to the rankage, motherfuckers. Rank.
It's all about death.
It's all about death. All right, Noel, do you want to play a game is what I want to ask you, motherfucker? Because we're about to play a game. Because this episode of Pair Rankers is all about Jigsaw traps, the man himself, John Kramer, the intricate engineerial degree. I can't fucking take any bit of hatred without tearing you down or making you tear yourself down, John motherfucking Kramer. So, Noel, we said we'd look at these crazy fucking Jigsaw traps. There's like 8-9 movies at this stage, and every movie consists of many traps.
8 or 9 too many.
Yeah. And oftentimes they consist of many traps, and the traps themselves oftentimes increase in intricacy as the movies go along.
Really?
Yeah. Like some of them are just like impossible. That's what I said about
see why you would think that.
That's why I talked about John Kramer and needing an engineering degree. Every fucking person in
John Kramer was dead by the third film. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. And we got like 6 more, and the traps keep getting more and more intricate, which doesn't suit any of the people that end up being the different jigsaws, because none of them have engineering degrees, is what you clearly need. But like aside from all that craziness and all the bombasticness of the Saw franchise and what it turned out to be the Fast and Furious of the horror world, Noel, what's your number 5? Let's start fucking jigsawing people. Let's start sawing up some traps.
You know, I've said, if anyone's listened to our previous podcasts, if we've talked about Saw, that they got so intricate and silly that it kind of lost me. But at the same time, I thought that the 6th film had some of the more overt kind of like, why not? At this point, why not? And I loved the acid room. And that is at the end where the insurance broker who denied Kramer, insurance is punished. And then it's him that ends up on the chopping block. And it's the family of the man that you think it's his family initially, but it's the family of the man that he turned away. And the man ultimately died because he couldn't get any treatment at America. But the family end up killing him with these kind of horrible injections of acid, and all of the horrible deaths you've seen building up to this kind of culminated in the most horrible death of all, because like I'd rather take, I'd rather hang, I'd rather take a shot than be like dissolved from the waist down. It was a completely horrendous death, and I remember it stuck with me, and it was the first one that came to mind. And when I thought about it, it wasn't the best, but it makes my list at number 5. Finn, what about you?
So acid room number 5 for you. Saw 6. Cool. I forgot to write down the name of which Saws they came from. So
it doesn't matter. Just shoot from the hip. We're talking.
I think it's Saw 3. I'm not too sure, but it's the Angel Trap. So the Angel Trap is where one of the detectives from one of the Saw movies, she's a female detective, gets put up on a trap, and
I think it was 3.
Yeah. I think it's 3 where you have Jigsaw's now gone, and. Or well, we think he's gone, but he's still alive. He dies in this movie, does he? He dies
in the third one, to the best of my knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the one where pretty much there's another Jigsaw, but they're not actually giving people the opportunity to get out of the traps. And this trap was kind of like one of the worst ones as well, because the female...
It was brutal.
Yeah, she was splayed up in kind of like a Blood Eagle type, if anybody knows the Norse mythology and Viking lore. And
this happened. It's not even like lore.
Yeah.
They used to do something like this.
Yeah, and she's hooked up to pretty much a rib splayer, for lack of a better term, and it would spread her out and make her look like an angel. But the only way she can escape is by putting her hand in a vat of acid to get her a key to the lock. But because this Jigsaw is not John Kramer, we find out that it's his accomplice, that she is actually not allowing people the opportunity to escape from the traps and save themselves in the way John Kramer had done. And this trap was pretty much one of those ones where you couldn't get away from. So she wasn't able to, she gets the key after like melting her hand, puts in the lock, it does some work, and she ends up getting splayed like an angel. It's fucking horrific. And also in terms of gore, it's visually stunning at the same time. So it's a really well constructed trap for me.
It's a very, very brutal trap. I can totally see why you would make your list, because it's got the whole, like, it doesn't matter thing, so you end up torturing yourself before you're ultimately tortured.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for number 4, man. I'm going to make this one real simple. It was the needle box from number 2, because if I'm in a life or death scenario,
The syringe trap.
Yes, I want I will never like turn on anyone, I'd like to think, but if the weak weeded themselves out and I wasn't to blame, then that would be absolutely fine. It'd be like, wow, we've after seen some absolute horrific deaths and everything is not to be trusted. Oh wait, no, the key's in the box. Like I'm just gonna put my hands up there. And you're just like, oh good God, oh good God, oh good God. And like not just, oh wait, no, my hand's trapped now and it hurts. Maybe if I put my second hand up there.
Yeah.
And then I just remember thinking, like, you know what? I hate, like, only in the guise of horror are you even allowed to say this. Good.
Yeah.
Just good. Just good. Good. I remember just feeling this was like satisfying because it just felt like, you know, the dumb one in the herd, like the, you know, the dumb buffalo had kind of like fallen behind you, kind of going, yeah, like if I have any chance of getting out here, I don't want to lose my humanity, but if like they wander off into the lion's den when unbeknownst to me, then I think I'm okay with it. So while it's not a gregarious over the top saw trap like the ones that we both just named, but that one to me was just so entertaining and kind of funny, and you know what, it came to my mind, so I decided not to overthink it. But needle box trap for me, number 4. What about you?
Number 4 for me was the syringe trap from Saw 2. Do you know the one where
Amanda's dropped into the
Amanda, we find out later on is Jigsaw's accomplice, but she gets thrown into the syringe trap and it's like trying to pull yourself through all those needles and probably all dirty needles, and she gets stabbed loads, and it wasn't even meant for her in the first place. It was meant for that big muscly dude. That trap for me was definitely one of the worst to be thrown into, because like just the thoughts of having all those fucking dirty needles and shit hanging out of you, and it's the only way you can claw out is by getting stabbed more and more times and pulling yourself to freedom and shit like that. But even though it's one of the more simple traps from Jigsaw, some of his more simple traps to me are some of his best, and this for me is something that you can actually imagine happening to you, where you get thrown into this shit, and you can imagine, because everybody's being stabbed with a hypodermic needle, everyone's had injections or whatever, so you know what that pain is like, whereas you don't know what some of these other things are because they're so huge. Like the angel trap I just mentioned, we could never imagine what that'd be like, but you could imagine what it'd be like stabbed with many needles all at once and many times, you know.
And happen to dig through, there's always that thing where it's one of those traps where you have to dig into your pain. So it's not just that it happens to you. And don't get me wrong, so having something happen to you is absolutely brutal. But when you yourself have to see through it and keep digging, it was brutal. And it was simple. Yeah. And some of the best traps actually were simple. But man, there was some ridiculous traps. You know, like a car hooked up to somebody's jaw, and there's a girl underneath the wheel, you know, there's all these different traps, and
the giant blender thing. Do you remember from one of the later saws? I think it was from Jigsaw. And
of course.
And it was run by the motorcycle engine that knocked down his nephew, or the bike was defective.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? All of those things.
Absolutely. But I do think that was effective. Okay,
let's keep fucking moving through these traps.
Number 3, I'm going to say the pendulum blade from Saw 5, because there was another one where Officer, that's what's gone through my head if I absolutely butchered it, is the Jigsaw shrug emoji, but it's got the pendulum, and the whole thing was that if he destroys his hands, the hands that had done so much damage, that it would stop the pendulum. But like he just exactly, so he destroys his hands, but it makes no odds, and the pendulum like slice, and then like down into the spinal column, slice, and it's really, really brutal. It's really, really visceral. I think it's the first trap actually of Saw 5.
Yeah, one of Amanda's traps.
Yeah, no, this is when the cop takes over. You remember the cop? It was a hooligan.
The real slick back hair dude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was, and he actually just looked like a greasy motherfucker.
I'd be able to say that.
A greasy motherfucker? I assume so.
Yeah, I know. I thought that trap was fucking awesome too. Is that one of the ones though that you couldn't escape from?
Yeah, that's it. There was never supposed to be a escape. That he was always kind of like destined to die, and that was the whole thing. Is that they had moved away from the purity of a Kramer trap.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing was that, as brutal as it may be, there could be some sort of window for actual Hoffman. That's what it was. It was Hoffman.
You're way off.
Oh yeah, Hoofman. Well, actually,
You said Hoogan.
yeah, no, did I though?
Yeah.
There's no proof of that or way
To
But
prove it.
I thought the trap was absolutely brutal, and I
Yeah.
thought the death was brutal, especially when you destroy your like. Had you done nothing, you would have been cut in half.
Yeah.
If you do something, you get your hands crushed, and then you get chopped in half.
Yeah.
So, I just I don't know. I thought it was brutal. What was your number three?
My number three was the 10 points trap. I think it was your one that plays what's her name? Julie Benz from Angel. She played Daria. I think it was her that's in it. It's like the one where her and another dude are stood in front of a box. They have to give 10 pints of blood for them to get their safety. But
And
the
you
way
find out that they were supposed to team up the entire time.
yeah, well, no,
They were
they do team up. That's what they do. It's, they have to put
no,
their
but they should have had they done it from the start till now. They would have only have had to give up like a fifth of their blood, as opposed to half of their blood.
yeah,
And that
no,
was the big turnaround. I remember at the end of that.
yeah, they had to put their hands into these boxes and these saws around, and
Mm.
the saws will cut up your hand, and that's how you give the blood. So like just imagine having to put your hand in there into a saw is one thing, but having to
It's
hold it there,
it chills. No,
yeah,
it's an awful thing even to think about.
yeah, exactly. So like for me, I think that's one of the better traps because it's just like thinking about because when you look at these scenarios, any horror fan does, and you look at the situation and what would you do in that situation, that I think is one of the harder ones to build yourself up to do. Like there's certain ones where you could imagine yourself in an absolute life or death situation that you might be able to build yourself up to do, but I think this would be one of the harder ones where you put your hand in and have it sawed to pieces so much that it collects 5 or 10 pints of blood or whatever the scenario is, that not only you have to put it in there, but the fact you have to hold it in there. And how long does it take for a machine to collect that amount of blood from your hand being sawn to pieces? It's not like you're opening up a vein and it's being pumped out of you, pure fluidly and flowing. It's being cut out of you. You're being chopped up, your bones being destroyed, your hand is being maimed, all of these things, whilst you're hoping that enough blood spatter comes out of you that can free you from this machine. And I just think of all the saw traps, that this would be the one I find one of the hardest I'd be able to amp myself up to do, you know?
I always found like I thought that was one of the more clever things because it turned out like the bathtub where you had to electrocute yourself, the start where they were all hooked up to the head choppy offy devices around their neck, and
The bucket one.
yeah, so that they could have all survived, and you kind of knew that retrospectively, and
Yeah.
now it was time to pay the price. So I do think that was actually a great trap. I have to give it to you. Okay, I'm going to go for my number two.
Number two, deuce, number two.
That's the song we do from now forever for the Rock from Saw 3.
Oh, good one. I like it.
It's a good trap.
Talk to me.
It's the guy gets to meet somebody who, he ran over his daughter and he gets this, he has a chance to save him, but of course it always comes with a price. And of course, because we need the kill, that he doesn't pay that price. And then, but I always thought one of the worst things that could happen to you, I always thought it's a strange mechanism in our body that if you just twist our, like if you twist our necks with enough severity, that it severs the spinal cord from the top of the brain and we die instantly. Yeah. But in this, you were held to this machine that just crushed you and then just slowly twisted your head around. Yeah. And there's something about, for me, I know there's a pain element, but there's something about me staring straight forward and a device like the seconds of a hand.
Impending doom.
Just ticking, like, let's just say 16 seconds, you're going to die. You know what I mean? Like, let's just say going counterclockwise, once you get below the 9 and start heading towards the 8, you've gone too far. And in 16, 17 seconds, you just break and die. And I always thought this was something so ultimately dark about that. It's not a death I had seen before. And I remember just thinking, like, man, like, I know he was tortured and he got his hands and legs crushed and all this kind of stuff. But I remember just thinking that absolute awful impendingness of it, because it's a machine that could probably crush a car. It's a machine that could like bend steel. It's just your poor fucking head. You have no chance. Nothing. There's no difference between a 13-year-old girl or a 400-pound world's strongest man. No difference whatsoever. It's a huge machine, and you are just going to die at a certain point when it reaches a certain point. That was scary to me, and so that's why it makes my number 2.
Yeah, and because something like you touched on is like for crushing steel or for compacting cars or something that has a real world application that you can imagine. And like anyone that's had a bad yank to their neck or they had a neck injury, like that pain is very relatable. It's like when you look at like the laser color that appears in one of the later movies, that's so outlandish and so ridiculous. That's like we talked about before, and I think the Jigsaw Spiral episode, check it out on Spotify. The we talked about that the more and more intricate and outlandish that the traps became, we cared less about the people that were actually suffering from the traps a lot of
Yeah, it
times.
became about the traps and not the people.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a lot of the problems that like horror movies have, where they fall in love with their villains and
Yeah,
instead of actually creating proper heroes or final girls. And this is a kind of this is definitely one of the
it's
franchise.
revenge fantasies. It just breaks down to revenge fantasy at a
Yeah,
certain point.
yeah, and this movie kind of falls guilty to that too. That it doesn't really have a reoccurring
What?
hero. Yeah, more so than most. But that's your number two. My number two is just like, and this is sort of like I was a bit unsure which one to pick, so I'm just going to throw both of them in the same category because both of them are so similar in a lot of ways and how they're styled.
They best be damn similar.
Yeah, well, my two I'm thinking is Reverse Bear Trap and the Venus Flytrap. Both those
That's
are,
fair.
yeah,
That's fair.
you know what I mean. Both of them were so similar that I didn't want to give them both a separate slot each because I wanted the traps to be varied in how they kind of did their thing, like So these two are both head apparatuses. One is a
No, one working one way and one working the other way.
yeah,
I do support your idea of putting them in like. I mean, it's going to crush me or it's going to open me, and I'm
yeah,
going to be dead either way. No, I'm not going to push back.
exactly. Yeah, one's almost the reverse of the other. That
Oh
kind of
yeah,
thing.
no, they're
Yeah,
in reversed or inversed even perhaps.
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so that, like, but I love the reverse bear trap. It's one of the most iconic traps in the entire Saw franchise. The scene itself is really well done. That like you see these kind of like weird looking braces that have been sewn into her head, kind of like headgear, and like she has to get the key out of a guy or something. She has to cut the key out of a guy and get that and open it up, like, and she survives and shit like that. But just the whole scene, and we've had 9 Saw movies, and this happened in the first Saw movie, is one of the most iconic of all the entire franchises. And the trap itself is definitely one of the most iconic. And you look at it, it's so iconic that it definitely inspired the Venus flytrap that we saw in the later editions of Saw. That was very similar scene, except the guy had to cut the key out of his own eye, and the trap, instead of splaying his head open through some sort of like wired mechanism, that was kind of like the head of an Iron Maiden that had these spikes inside, and it would slam shut and crush your head. And that's what I liked about it. The reason, like, it was so terrifying, the fact that you had to cut it out of yourself, up the ante from her having to cut it out of someone else. But they're so similar in terms of their the apparatus themselves, and obviously Venus flytrap was inspired by the reverse bear trap, and I wanted to keep the traps themselves more and more varied, and that's why I kind of bracketed them together. And for me, I think both of them are very relatable traps. You can imagine the pain you'd go through having your head ripped apart, and
Not
like,
just that. Well, I can't. Sorry, you're going to have to help me with the bear trap. Sorry, the reverse bear trap. But I
yeah,
remember he with the Venus flytrap, he had to cut the key out of his own eye. So
yeah,
there's also the price you pay.
yeah.
And I can't remember what the bear trap gimmick.
She had to cut the key out of a guy. She had to kill a guy and cut the key out of
He
him.
had to kill a guy and cut the key out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
So yeah,
reverse, definitely inspiration taken from.
definitely again in burst, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, it works. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You know what I mean? That's why I kind of grouped them together, like, because as I said, I wanted to keep my traps as different as each other, from one another. Sorry. So, all right, Noel, that's my number two. What's your number one? I'll give my number one. We'll do our honorable mentions, and then we'll rank the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's a lot of rank. But my number one, and this one, I didn't actually end up like. I watched a few things on YouTube, and I looked at some lists just to get it back into my head.
Yeah.
But this was the one that stuck with me. I didn't have to think about this. This one was Shotgun Carousel from Saw 6.
Yeah.
And it's because of a line that I've never heard anyone repeat. It obviously had more of an impact on me than anyone else. But there's obviously, it's a shotgun, and I'm going to say 6 people, I think, in the carousel, and the shotgun is going to kill them all, bar you destroy your left hand to save one, and you destroy your right hand to save another.
Yeah.
So they're all people from the same branch, this insurance broker guy, who they're all like vulture capitalists. They're all awful. And you know, there's a woman pretending to be like screaming that she's pregnant, and there's all this kind of thing. But I remember one line was where he lets a few people die and he saves one person, and then there's another person, he's like blah blah blah, like, you know, I want to live. But then when he can clearly see that he's not going to save him, he says, look at me when you kill me. And of course you would have to. If you're in that scenario, you would be shamed, because the very least you can do with the person you don't choose is look at them if they say so. And I remember just thinking that's such a warped psychology, that I just remember thinking that's horror done well. I remember thinking in that moment, it was quite a cheesy film, but I remember thinking in that moment that I was like, he was like, look at me when you kill me. And I remember kind of like, I got a little chill up my spine. I remember going, that's an awful, awful trap. Like, that's an awful thing to do to a human being. Is in like, I can save 2 of 6, and even the 2 I save, it costs me so much.
Yeah.
Like, it cost me a hand that will never heal, like broken, crushed hand.
Yeah.
So I just thought that trap just left an impact on me. And again, that's just me. That's just my flavor. That's just the one that left an impact on me. Boo. But you know what? Saw 6, Shotgun Carousel, motherfucker.
Yes, Shotgun Carousel is fucking good ones. Like, as you said, like, because not only are you being put through pain, but it's not like a lot of the other traps is your life against your pain, but this is other people's lives against your pain. And it's you weighing up how much pain you're willing to put yourself through to save only a certain amount of them, and who do you save, and how do you weigh it up?
I think it's 6. I looked at it much earlier today. Yeah, I think it was 6, and there's two people that aren't going to get shot. So it's a terrible predicament. It's philosophical in a way, even, you know, that whole like the tram, and it's going to hit one person or it's going to hit 5, but it's going to hit 5 unless you change the lane, ergo you are responsible for the person. It's mind fucky. Because I just thought that was that done well.
If you let the tram run its course, then you're not responsible technically, because the tram was already going to kill those 5 people. And you could kill one person. That one person's dying for me unless I know them. But
it's mind fucky. And I just thought that but the guy saying, look at me when you kill me, because it's the least you have to give him. I always just thought that was a great line. It just was, for me, for what I look for in horror. I stuff like that sticks with me, and I just thought that was a great line. Finn hit me hard.
No, I was just going to follow up and just say that's one thing that trap did that a lot of them don't do, is actually create the human aspect within the trap and show the stakes correctly. Some of these traps are so bombastic and outlandish that you don't really see the human aspect, because you're just so focused on when the trap is going to conclude and see the aftermath. And I think that's
exactly.
Was this one where you really felt the tension, was palpable. But for me, the last one I chose for my number 1 was because anytime I see this scene and anytime I imagine myself in this scenario, I just hate the fucking thoughts of being in it, man. Just every single fucking time I think about it. And for me, that is the razor wire maze from part 1. It's where the kind of heavy set dude is put in a maze of razor wire, and the only way to get to the other side is by cutting yourself to pieces by climbing through razor wire. And it's one of the more simplistic ones and one of the best ones, I think.
Simplistic is such a compliment.
Yeah, it is.
When it got so convoluted.
Yeah.
Simplistic is such a compliment.
Oh man, like
it got crazy. Not just the setup of the trap, but like let's just say I went Shotgun Carousel. But like, I mean, okay, I want to do this. I have to kidnap my subject.
Yeah.
B, I have to be enough of an engineer to build a shotgun carousel, like that could destroy one hand, all that kind of jazz. Then I have to kidnap 6 more people, and then I have to get them all to a place with none of this without getting caught. What you're talking about is, I'm not saying easy, but a human being could do that to a human being. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. And it was horrifying.
Yeah.
So I think it's an excellent choice.
Yeah, it's so easy to set up. Like, you just get a big fucking cage and you put shit on a razor wire around the structure, and you tell people to crawl through, and you put no clothes on them. They're going to get ripped to shreds. But like, I think
it's a great idea, and it's why I'm not allowed to plan any of my niece's birthdays.
It's like pin the tail on the donkey got dark. It's like to reach the donkey for this tail, you had to put his blindfold and climb through this cage filled with razor wire. Surprise! Happy 8th birthday, Genie. But like I just think like most of my traps came from the earlier Saw movies because they're the ones for me were the most realistic that I could actually imagine happening to me as a human being, and not these fucking laser collars or these gigantic blenders or buckets on the head and stuff like this that like were really, really over the top. And that's the problem, the detriment of the franchise, that became a cartoon of what the earlier movies were. They were dark, they were gritty, they were realistic to a sense, but that's why most of my traps come out of the earlier movies, except for one or two. Like, and so no, before we get the fuck out of here, what's your honorable mention? Mine was going to be, I'm just gonna put it out there because I changed it because you already used it and I didn't want to repeat it. I was going to talk a little bit about the pendulum one. I thought that was a really cool trap, but I came up with another one while we were talking. So no, what's your honorable mention?
Lawnmower trap. There was
Lawnmower
a lawnmower trap. It was, oh God, which one was it? It was one where they had the focus group on people who would survive Jigsaw 6, 7 3D, 3D maybe.
Saw 3D.
Yeah, and there's one where they're both dangling over lawnmower blades, and he's trying to kick her, and she's like screaming, but she just reaches across the chain and bitch slaps him.
Yeah,
like as in he's kicking and kicking, but I just remember she kind of goes, ah. And he falls and he gets hit so hard by the blades that it splurts up into her face. And I remember just thinking, not making my top 5, but that was enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that is it. I'm not going to over explain it. I'm not even going to overthink it. I just remember thinking like that was kind of funny. That just did it for me. I'm not going to like bury myself in this the psychology of this. That was fun.
Yeah, it's like that's why it's an honorable mention. You know what I mean? It's just like,
no, man, I think I hit the definition of an honorable mention right now. I have to be honest. I'm pretty proud of myself. In fact. Yeah, no, I nailed it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
My honorable mention is I don't know the exact name of the trap, but do you remember when the dude is covered in like grease or oil, and there was a puzzle. And to get out, there was like a door, and there was a combination to the door, and the combination was painted on the wall. And he had only a candlelight to light the wall as he was reading it, but he was covered in this flammable grease. So if he spilled the candle once, he would burst into flames. And he had to try keep getting the combination off the wall and keep putting it in. And eventually the candle falls out of his hand and sets him on fire, and he dies. And I just thought that was one of the most terrifying traps, because could you imagine that? Like, where literally any kind of fucking mishap or any misstep, you're on fire. And what, like, immolation's one of the worst ways to go.
Oh, like, immolation is a terrible. It's called the flammable jelly trap.
The flammable jelly trap, thanks, man. And
it's from Saw 3, and it's also known as the candle trap. To keep it simple,
because I just wrote really quickly. I was like, candle wax puzzle.
No, and again, to anyone listening, the whole point is to research as little as possible. When it comes to like a franchise that you've actually absorbed, and you have to like go back and think like, well, what did I take from it? As opposed to going back and like watching all of the films and take notes. And if this is the one that stuck with you and you didn't like go back and like try and research everything, like that's what I wanted you to do. That's what you wanted me to do. So like, I didn't know. I just looked it up now and I've got it. It's from Saw 3, and it's the candle trap, or it's the flammable jelly trap.
I watched like 11-minute video in preparation for this episode just to remind me of the names of the traps themselves. And the reason I didn't have the name for this one is because, as I said to you before we gave our honorable mentions, that I kind of changed my choice just to vary it up a bit, because for the entirety of the show, we've all, like, it shows you the amount of traps that are in the Saw movies, that we've picked completely different traps for every single pick. None of us duplicated, and that's why I wanted to remove the pendulum, because we hadn't duplicated yet. And I was like, this is a trap that when I was thinking about it throughout the episode, that I could imagine happening to me. And it was in one of the first 3 Saw movies as well, which most of my traps are from the earlier Saw movies. And I think this as well is something that you could do. You don't need an engineering degree to paint a load of combinations on a wall and to cover someone in grease and to give them a candle and lock them in a room. That doesn't take a lot to do. You just kidnap one person, you know what I mean? So like, the traps for me that were actually conceivable in reality are the more terrifying ones, because I can imagine them actually happening to me. And that's how I picked these traps.
Because even someone with a master's degree would have a hard time with some of these traps, of course. I mean, we're talking bikes hooked to people, hooked to cylinders hooked to gyros, hooked to, and of course, again, you have to understand kidnapping all these people. Like, it's not,
like
so
kidnapping.
many.
Like, there's like 8 people in that shotgun thing in the scenario.
Yeah,
7
like,
people,
and they're
6 in
like
the trap, one
bouncers
guy.
at like really popular nightclubs, or they're like
Yeah.
high profile doctors or whatever.
You know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculous. Like, so I just like the single traps, one person, maybe 2 people, because it's just more realistic, it's more doable, it's more frightening to me, it's more horrific. All these things that I think that make the traps the best traps. The reason I picked them, because I could imagine all of these things, and I can imagine how horrible it would be to have all these things occur to me, and I can imagine all of them occurring in real life. And the most outlandish of all the traps I went for was probably the angel trap, and that's why you placed number 5. I just like the way it looked visually. But for me, I think the Jigsaw, it's most terrifying, and Saw, the franchise, that it's most terrifying is when it's more simplistic, more realistic, and more raw with the sort of traps that it goes through. And that's why I picked my choices today. How about you, motherfucker? And we get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. There was something about excuse me. Saw basically builds into the revenge fantasy that we all have. And I can only think about 1 or 2 instances that I know of. And to be honest with you, they're not anything that happened to me, because I think any person will go to war for someone they love more than they go to war for themselves.
Yeah.
And I've thought of 1 or 2 people who have had something happen to them, and I would go to war for them. And the ones that I suppose give me that little bit of release, as in like, yeah, that's what I do, boo you, are the ones that are a little bit simpler. But I did like the gregariousness of some of the traps, because it's escapism. And I do think that, like, for example, your number 1 trap, I actually think it's an excellent pick. If I was to put a gun to my head, I'd say you definitely have me top, because my one was so over the top. But I do think that that's what Saw was. It's torture porn, but it's also like, that'd learn him. It's just been able to release that in a safe environment. And I applaud that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I do think that so I do think it could have been a great franchise, and with some of the traps we've named, it lost itself. And with some of the traps, it found itself. And I think that with yours it did, with mine it's lost. And ultimately, I think there's space in the zeitgeist for it. But I do think that it could have been more than what it was, looking at it from the outside. But
yeah, I'm the same. Like, because we picked 12 traps between the 2 of us from the 9 movies, and some of the ones that we chuckled at were the more outlandish ones and the more intricate ones. I just think Saw felt like it just needed to keep going bigger and bigger and bigger, and it really didn't. It should have just kept the same tone, go out, and that's what would have made that franchise what it was. These really gritty, visceral, grimy traps that like anybody could make. You don't need an engineering degree. You don't need to have the ridiculous level of circumstances to fall your way for the trap to be successful. You don't need to kidnap half a dozen of an office building. You know what I mean? Like, so it just the believability of the traps just became less and less for me as they went along, or the circumstances you need to create for the traps to work successfully. It became almost like a computer game. Like, you know what I mean? It had to be so systematically put in place, so meticulous, that not one thing would ever fall away. And how you can plan those things out and all the variables that occur is just a bit too much for me. But when you can hook an apparatus to someone's head and kidnap them, or you can put a key in someone's eye after you drug them and put the Venus flytrap in, or you can put someone in a cage and tell them to crawl through razor wire, all these things can be done, or chuck someone into syringes. That all these things are believable to me. And I think, as I said, that's when Saw was at its best. And that's why, you know what I mean? Like, the traps that scare me the most are the most believable ones, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, and here are the 56 people who have heard the most, which I've kidnapped from, including the pilot on that plane.
It's just so much. Like, you know what I mean? It just gets so far fetched.
And I lose myself. And again, John Kramer was dead, and then like 6 films later, it's like, but do you remember that? You bumped into me in the street. I dropped my latte.
Now you remember as you steam to death in this 60-foot pile of latte.
And it would be a 60-foot. Oh God! But you know what? Like, Saw, I guarantee, like, Saw is my like confused about my sexuality of films. It's just, it's something that I struggle with, and maybe I will for a while, and that's fine. And everyone is beautiful. Please don't cancel me. But anyway, dude, that's it. That's my breakdown of these fucking films. And I love ranking with you.
Yeah, man. It's always fun when we rank.
It's watching you rank.
Yeah, I'm a very fluid ranker. You know what I mean? And my rankage is fluid. I'm in peak rankage right now.
Like I kind of start out a little shy, and
Yeah,
it's like I'm not even ranking, and
yeah,
then but you're ranking like
yeah,
so much
yeah. I
that
just I'm a fast ranker. I get in there, deep rankage.
yeah, and then I
You're a
just
slow
feel
build
like
rankage.
yeah, yeah, you know what? But now I'm starting to feel like maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Maybe it doesn't make me less of a ranker.
No, it's just your natural style of ranking.
It's just how I do.
It's how you do. It's because we do what we do and we do what we do.
What we do.
You're just an
okay.
ranker. That's
we
all
came, we saw trapped, we conquered.
Yeah, I love it. And like, I just think all Saw movies, the qualities have varied, but they've always entertained us in one way or another, whether that's with cool shit or silly shit. And that's all we can ask for. So I'm your host, Vincent Green.
I'm your host, Noel John Tui.
We are pair rankers, and that was our favorite Saw traps and Jigsaw traps, or whatever way you want to phrase it. See you next time, mother rankers. Peace.
Peace.